Well, we've been discussing this evening the government's controversial new migration legislation designed to try and ensure those crossing the Channel in small boats are swiftly removed to a third country like Rwanda. Well, that passed the Commons today. There was, of course, lots of opposition from Labour and others, but also some concerns from some on the Conservative benches as well. Now, we can talk to our next guest, who won some concessions from the government over unaccompanied children. Tim Loughton joins us now. Thank you very much for being with us. So how did you vote today?
I voted for the bill. This bill needs to go through because we have got to do something practical to stop this completely unsustainable and dangerous business of small boats coming across the Channel in a disorderly way. And it's tough. There are really tough measures in the bill to clamp down on bogus asylum seekers and on the people smugglers who are benefiting from this tragic trade. And I wanted to balance that with making sure that there are clearly defined safe and legal routes, which was an amendment that I put down with a lot of colleagues, which the government has accepted. So there will be clearly set out safe and legal routes for genuine asylum seekers to be able to come to the UK, particularly if they have a close connection, without having to go in the small boats. I
just want to unpick this a bit for people who might not be familiar with the phrase safe and legal routes, because the situation as it stands is that for many countries, including places like Sudan, for example, that's been in the news, there aren't any ways for people to legally claim asylum in the UK, right?
There are, but they're really difficult. So if you come from Hong Kong or Ukraine, there have been the resettlement schemes, and we've taken over 300,000 people from those two areas, and we'll take a lot more, particularly from Hong Kong. If you're part of the Syria scheme, we took on 25,000 Syrians and gave them safe passage and brought to the UK. And then there's the Afghanistan scheme as well. The trouble is with the Afghanistan scheme, where we airlifted, I think at the time, about 15,000 people legally from Kabul airport in a hurry, something like 9,000 of them, 18 months later, are still in hotels. So it shows the problem about how we not just bring them to the UK safely, but then can give them full-time, permanent accommodation. So it's not easy. So there are routes through family reunion and through the UNHCR, the refugee agency, but they're really difficult to get on. So what we want is to make sure we have got proper safe and legal routes, widely advertised, much more accessible, and these will be additional to what we've got now. And that's what the government has agreed. So the example that I challenged the Home Secretary with notoriously some months ago, what if I'm a 16-year-old orphan from an East African country with a relative legally in the UK? How would I get to the UK safely and legally, which she slightly struggled to answer. That hypothetical situation became a reality this week with Sudan. That 16-year-old is actually happening now. So we need to make sure that we can pass that 16-year-old Sudanese test for somebody who clearly is an asylum seeker, clearly escaping danger, has a connection with the UK if they've got a relative here, so has a case to apply for asylum to the UK. That's the sort of person we need, and I think most people would agree that we have a duty to.
Because right now the 16-year-old from Sudan can't get here. Right?
If they had a relative that can go through quite an elaborate process, they might stand a chance. If they made it to a UNHCR refugee camp or something like that, then they might be able to. What we need to do, as we've done in the past, we've done it very successfully in the past, is expand family reunion schemes and say to the UNHCR, we are prepared to take on, from Sudan or whatever, X number of genuine refugees. Please go and identify for them and we'll arrange for them to come over here. And that's the sort of thing we're going to get in the future now.
Now, I'll level with you. When I kind of interview ministers, they say, yes, we're going to open more safe and legal routes. Yeah, it's going to happen, it's going to happen. Not right now. We can't say what they are. We can't say how we're going to do it, but it's going to happen. Do you actually believe them?
Yes, it's got to happen. So what the amendment that I got through today says, ideally what I wanted it to do is that when this bill goes into law and all the tough measures come in, the safe and legal routes are ready to kick into action. I didn't get that because there's a lot of work still to be done. But what the amendment does guarantee is that within 6 months of the bill going through, the government will have had to properly consult with local authorities and others to see what we can take and how we're going to accommodate them. It's not a case of bringing them here, but how are we going to look after those people, and what those safe and legal routes are going to look like, how people will be able to access them and get to the UK. And they will start next year. Now, that's a bit of a gap, but actually it's a clear undertaking that will now be on the face of the bill, and the government will be beholden to, and we'll make sure that happens.
You'll make sure it happens. How are you going to do that? You're going to be on their case?
Well, if they don't produce those details when the bill goes to the House of Lords, this bill is going to get a tough time in the House of Lords. It's a controversial bill. It's necessarily tough. There are going to be many more changes to it before it becomes law. But if people want safe and legal routes, this bill now offers it. So there's got to be a compromise in the Lords. We want more detail from the government as to what they're going to look like in order to get it through the Lords so these safe and legal routes can start. So I'm confident. We're trusting ministers to produce it. They've said there's going to be an annual vote in Parliament as to how many refugees we can sustainably take on. We want to do this, but we want to make sure we're taking on the right people, genuine refugees escaping persecution, civil war, Sudan, who have a connection with the UK, and that's what this does.
Andrew Mitchell earlier said that the government is testing the limits, in his words, of international law. I mean, some would say that they're breaking it.
Well, OK, so there's an issue about the European Convention and this problem when we try and deport people, then at the last minute there is an interim injunction produced under the ECHR by an anonymous European judge, and that's happened so many times, and that grounded the Rwanda flights, which haven't started yet. Those Section 39 injunctions, they used to be called temporary injunctions, are not actually part of the European Convention. They are an internal process of the European Convention system. Everybody raves about the ECHR. Over the last 10 years, there are more than 400 Convention rulings that have not been complied with. We are one of the best compliers with Convention rulings. There's, I think, only 9 outstanding rulings we haven't complied with, which includes things like giving votes to prisoners, which in Parliament we voted against because I and most people don't actually believe in. In Spain, I think the figure is something like 61% of those Convention rulings have not been complied with. In Italy, it's 58%. France, Germany is very high.
But you can't pick and choose, can you? That's not how law works, is it?
No, but what I'm saying is we have only not complied with a very small number. Lots of other European countries have not complied with a very large number, but we're the ones who are in the frame. And the Convention knows they've got to change their methods as well.
We are out of time. Always interesting to talk to you. Thank you very much for being on the programme.